We're reading this morning from Colossians chapter 3, 5 through to verse 11. And it says, "Therefore, treat the parts of your earthly body as dead to sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and greed, which amounts to idolatry. For it is because of these things that the wrath of God is coming upon the sons of disobedience. And in them you also once walked, when you were living in them. But now you also rid yourselves of all of them: anger, wrath, malice, slander, and obscene speech from your mouth. Do not lie to one another, since you stripped off the old self with its evil practices, and have put on the new self, which is being renewed to a true knowledge according to the image of the one who created it. A renewal in which there is no distinction between Greek and Jew, circumcised and uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave and free, but Christ is all and in all."
Good morning, listeners. Good morning, Theo. How are you on this 11th day, on this momentous Monday? For some, it's a monstrous Monday. I trust you don't fall in between those two extremes, monstrous and monumental.
Trying to think of another M. Moody? Malignant?
Mighty?
Mighty? No, mighty. No, not mighty. But meandering through the 64th year of my life. 10th of November is my birthday. And so this is the first day in a new grand episode, new chapter in my life.
Okay, that makes you a year younger.
Absolutely.
No, a
Glad
year
to
older.
be here.
Sorry, you don't look your age. You sound your age, but you don't look it. Well, it's good to have good to have you on the air, Theo.
Thank you.
Good to have you, listeners. Welcome you to Fifth Connection on this Monday morning as we continue in the text, because we are looking at a letter written to a group of believers, written to an assembly, that highlights the need for wisdom. Wise up, Paul says, throughout the letter, this concept of wisdom is spoken of. And in the first chapter of Colossians, wisdom is personified. It's like a person Paul is addressing. Wisdom's way is an expressive behavior. It expresses itself in a particular kind of behavior, and it has an expressive power to it because it follows the fractal pattern of salvation. Christ died and Christ rose again. Your and my life will follow that pattern. We will die to the old and come alive to the new. It's called identification death. And then in chapter 2, Paul addresses the pitfalls to wising up. You remember in chapter 1, it is all to maturity, not just some, not the elite, not just clerical George, not only the elders, it is all to maturity. That's the goal that we should be reaching for. And now in chapter 3, going right into chapter 4, Paul is going to talk about the postures that make for wise living. How do we posture ourselves to reach for wisdom? Last week we looked at how we are heavened for earth. Heavened in the true sense of the word. I can experience something of heaven in my heart long before I get to heaven, but it is but a foretaste. It's not all of it. It's a taste of coming attractions. It's like a premiere of coming attractions. And so, how do I get heaven into my heart? Well, I need to get it into my head first. But you see, in biblical, if I could call it that, biblical thinking, a biblical mentality sees head and heart functioning very much together. The heart is the control room of the human being. And thinking and the mind is right in there. And so I think back to a time in my own life, not too long ago, that I decided to get rid of a very favorite thing of mine. It was a nice big Harley, what they call the couch, right? A huge bike of 475 kgs. And I decided to sell this bike because there were a couple of things I wanted to do. I thought radio is a wonderful avenue of expression. So let's put the money into radio. And I thought, that's a brilliant idea. Until the day came that the bike had to be loaded onto a trailer and towed away from in front of my house where I live. And I must tell you, as that bike moved away from number 20, Stone Edge on Dyser Road, my heart jerked. And I've often thought back to June of this year when that happened. Because it's easy to say, oh, we'll just give this up and we'll just give that up and we'll sell this and we sell that, until the time comes to get rid of those things that our egos are attached to. And then we discover it's a lot harder than we think. Because you see, did I become my Harley Davidson? Am I my position? Am I my job? Am I the relationship in which I am married to my wife? Am I that? Am I the money I have in my bank account? My offshore investments? Oh, there are so many things that we are egoically, our egos are tied to those things. And only when those things get stripped away do we sense the pain, the tug on our hearts, as we need to rip away from allegiance to stuff and often to people. So with this time that we have left, we're going to look at having heaven in our hearts means detaching from egoic entanglements, ego attachments, ego entanglements, and transcend relational barriers, things which block our relationships with one another, to get beyond that. And how do we go beyond that? How do we detach from that to which we are egoically entangled or tied to? Well, I believe that the writer answers or asks that question in verse 5 of chapter 3 of Colossians, all the way to verse number 11. And the question he asks is, how do we break free from ego entanglements, egoic attachments, and relational barriers that block us from being all that God intends for us to be? How do we do that? How do we break away? How do I break out of these ideologies, these ideas that captivate my mind, these things that I am locked onto? And so in verse 5 to verse 11, he's going to talk to us about three things that need to happen. The first is to unhitch. The second, hold on to your chair, undress. And the third, untie. Unhitch, undress, untie. Unhitch yourself, undress yourself, untie yourself. Now listen very carefully each time what I need to get away from. Unhitch from, undress to, and untie from. So let's look at verse number 5 and verse number 6 and see how that Paul addresses this prompt. And I call them prompts because the imperatives in the New Testament under grace are prompts, right? We view them as the be all and end all. And this is the end. I must love my wife. I submit to my husband. I obey my boss. That's the end. No, no, no. That is just but the start. There's a whole range of encounters that I'm going to be walking through and experiencing these prompts ripple through those encounters as I live my life. It's not just a once off thing. And so I need to unhitch myself in verse 5 and 6 from sexual evil in relationships. Verse 5, watch what it says. Very specifically. Put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you. On the basis of what I need to set my mind on in verse 1 to verse 4. In verse 1, it's very interesting. I need to seek the things that are above. And then verse 2, I need to set my mind on things that are above. What are those things that are above? Here's the truth. Therefore, based upon these two things, I must put to death what is earthly in me. The things that lay hold of my life, the things that grip me, that get me into a neck lock and into a vice grip, and I struggle to get out of it. Put to death what is earthly in you. And you can only put to death which Christ has already put to death because of your and my identification death with him on Calvary's cross. You see, these things need to be taught through and thought through very, very carefully. One of our problems, I think, in evangelicalism is that we understand the cross in salvation. We say Jesus saves on the basis of his death and resurrection. Both of those things go together. Romans 4:17 and Romans 5 verse 9. Justification, we are justified by his life. And then 5:9, we are justified by his blood, by his death. Those two things must hang together. And as I desire to live for God, I'm going to experience many deaths across my lifetime. Death to those egoic attachments that I have to people and things. We think of the people, think of your favorite preacher, your guru, your pastor, the guy down the street. And we get so tied to men, tied to women, tied to institutions, because we think that they are the things that we need to give our hearts to. And then the Lord shows us it's all about him and our allegiance to him. And everything else must go. I hope you're listening. Everything else must go. And it takes a lifetime to learn what those things are that my ego is tied to. There's things that I do that make me feel real good. There's nothing wrong with feel good, feeling good. But if it's tied to things that are just purely transient and I'm building my life on that transient foundation, that is extremely dangerous. And that's why Paul says those earthly things, here they are: sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. And here he lists 5 things that fall into the category of idolatry. What is idolatry? Well, anything that substitutes for God in my life, that I substitute for God in my life. It could be my child. It could be my wife. It could be my new car. Anything that substitutes for God that we gravitate to try and get ultimate satisfaction from is what needs to be slain in our lives. Put to death what is earthly. And he lists those things. We've just had very sad news. Our favorite rugby captain has gone through a crushing divorce. And the story has just ripped through the country. If you watch and listen to what people are saying, how they are devastated because of this relationship that now has run shipwreck. Um, Very sad situation. How do you get there? What's happened? You see, these things don't happen by accident. A godly life is not the product of an accident. It's the product of being strategically intentional in my walk with God. And so we're going to take our time unpacking these aspects over the next number of days. So there's no rush to get through as fast as we can. And that's why, Theo, at this point, I want to hand back to you.
Yeah, this is one of those landing the plane kind of things, or as some folks say in certain cultures, where the rubber meets the road. And so, yeah, Terry, thank you very, very much for sharing that. Um, I just wanted to maybe also say that we are sharing as a team the pain that our brother who's gone home with the Lord and his family faces, brother Ambrose, who went home on Friday. That's it. Am I correct, Terry?
That's right.
Yeah. So we thank the Lord for Ambrose's life and for his commitment to pursue wisdom in this really very difficult world. And we thank the Lord for his ministry and testimony. And we do trust for calm and for balm for his family as they navigate through this very, very difficult time. Terry, thank you very, very much this morning. For those of you who've listened in, you have joined us here on the Fifth Connection at www.fifthfactor.co.za. We'll be back tomorrow morning as we continue this particular chapter, this particular episode in the life of this fellowship, this church, this assembly.
Thanks, Theo. Thank you, listeners.
Thank you. So we have a song that will ring a bell for many of those of you who love these old hymns. And the beauty of these is that the words in these hymns have such rich contributions that they make to our thinking. And we trust that this will be a blessing for you too. Terry, thank you very much, my brother, and have a wonderful rest of your day.